Hey crafty people, welcome back to my channel, and in case you're new here, I'm Sarah, also known as Craft Nerd because I'm a nerd who loves to craft. I do paper crafting, card making, junk journaling, and mixed media art. Let's get crafting! Well, welcome to my channel. Today we're going to do some more prep work for the Christmas makes I have planned, and I realize I am very late in getting started this year. And so today we're going to do some inky and altered papers for the various things I have planned. And for one of the makes, I want to do some die cutting, so I want to create some interesting backgrounds to die cut out of. So I've pulled out a couple Tim Holtz Stampers Anonymous stamps. I've got Zigzag and Diamonds CMS 242, Ticking and Grain CMS 475, and Perfect Plaid CMS 383. Use whatever big background stamps you have that you like. Let's see. Let's start with this guy. And I've cut a bunch of pieces of this is just regular cardstock because I'm not going to go too heavy-handed with the water, so it should hold up just fine. Let me grab a big block and let's put my squishy mat down because things stamp better if you have something squishy behind the paper you're stamping on. So, and I'm going to be using Distress inks, and I think this one will go red. So I'm going to grab Lumberjack Plaid. And I'm going to go a little haphazardly, like I'm not looking for perfection when I stamp. I'm also going to do a light mist of water, and so let's move this out of the way so it doesn't get all wet. So basically I'm just going to I've got one of those misty spray bottles and give it a little bit of a spritz so it's damp. Bring our paper back over, and I'm going to go down here and stamp, and we'll see what we got. Yeah, that's kind of what I was looking for. Let's give this a little bit of a dry. And actually, while I've got the stamps still damp and it's still some ink, let's just go ahead and stamp it again. And for this, I think let's give it a little dry. I'm gonna grab a little Rustic Wilderness and add a little of that in. Now the reason I dried this is because if the red's wet, I'm gonna get more of a brown instead of them layering together, because yeah, red and green mixed together makes kind of brown. And one more thing I want to do to this side, because I want to bring out some of the brighter red again, is I am going to grab a block, smoosh some ink on there, give that a little wet, grab a brush, and do that. Set that aside for now. And those guys are done. Let's go ahead and use the zigzag one. And we'll go green on this one. And I actually think, let's grab a little Rustic Wilderness Distress Oxide and mix that in as well. So we're going to get a couple variations on the green. And getting distress ink on your oxide is not going to cause a problem. You just don't want to get distress oxide on your distress ink pads because of the pigment in the distress oxides. All right, again, I'm going to spritz. I'm just going to turn off to the side. Stamp once. Shift over. Stamp again. I like those. Let's give them a quick dry. Now for this one, I'm going to do some of it. I'm going to do some red on. So we'll grab our Lumberjack Plaid. And some I want to just do some antique linen for. So we're going to go. And that one's done. Now for our next one, I think I'm actually going to do some antique linen inking for the background first. Since I'm doing a bigger surface, I'm grabbing a bigger brush. Now I'm going to take the same big brush and grab tea dye and add a little of that in. And let's see, I do not have a cup over here. I need a cup. That'll work. I'm just going to add some water to clean off the brush. Then I'm gonna drop stuff all over the place. Now I want to do some splatters in, let's go vintage photo. Let's go a little darker than the browns we've been using. Just gonna grab another block, smush on some ink. I'm also going to splatter some water on here. Give that a second to activate the ink. And then I'm going to take our cloth and go like so. And then we're going to take this stamp. And I've already misplaced the block I was using. So we're just going to grab another block and we're going to do, let's do Lumberjack Plaid for this. Again, going to spritz this with water. Ooh, I like that. That I want to give a little dry too, so that it doesn't move around too much more. Now without re-inking, we're just gonna go ahead and stamp again. That one aside. I think we're gonna do a little bit of that and smoosh a little bit more on. And I am gonna give this a light spritzing because those teeny tiny dots don't exactly love those little guys. I mean, some of them are gonna get covered up once we stamp for sure, but and then let's do this. And I know it's not completely dry, but we're going through like grungy backgrounds, so we might as well just go for it. Let's shift this for a sec while I add our ink. On stamp. Ooh, I like that. And then we shall stamp again. I like that too. All right, we got 2 more, and I want to do a little tone on tone. So we're going to grab one. We're going to grab our red, and we're going to Lumberjack Plaid it. And, ooh, I got some smoosh on there. That's fine. It's not a big deal. Oh, look, I'm getting fingerprinty. All right, so that one's now red. We're gonna grab one of the ticking and grain. Gonna re-ink. Dry. Spritz, and then stamp this way up here. So we get a plaid. All right, I'm gonna do the same thing with the other ticking and grain stamp in green. And yeah, I know I've got like swirly globs, but that's fine because we're going to be stamping over it, so it's no big deal. It's like, that went way off, but that's all right. Okay, I'm gonna let that dry. I'm gonna have a bit of a cleanup, and then I'll be back and we will work on our next background. Okay, so don't adjust your screens. Yes, there's just a big sheet of white paper, and it's 11 by 14 because one of the pieces I'm planning on doing is 11 by 14. Actually, let's pull this mat out from underneath because, yeah, it's bigger than the mat, and so that's just gonna cause problems. Oh no, did I just get smush on there? Crud. All right, this is why it's important to make sure you clean off your work surface thoroughly. All right, let's try this again. Let me trim off a new piece because this paper is 11 by 17 because I accidentally bought the wrong paper. Because this is the paper I usually print the digital pages for a journal on. It's a 65-pound Hammermill premium color copy paper. So it's not cardstock heavyweight, but it's a little heavier than just a regular copy paper. All right, for this we're gonna do the shaving cream technique, which I know I've done on my channel before, but I really like it and I thought it would be cool for this piece. So if you didn't see that video and aren't familiar with the technique, what you do is you put a glob of shaving cream on plastic plate, paper plate, whatever you want. I'm gonna spread that out a little with a spatula. Or, you know, palette knife, whatever. And then what we're gonna do is we're gonna take, for this one, I wanna use both Reinkers and some Mica Stains. So those need to get shaken up. Put a couple dots of, this is Wonderland. I'm not sure how well these are going to work. I don't know that I've tried them with this technique. We're going to do some Salty Ocean Reinker. Put maybe a dot and a dot because, yeah, it's not getting as much pigment on there, but we'll give it a try. Hoping it'll give a little sparkle. This is Tumbled Glass. I'm going to use Broken China, Reinker, and then let's also add like all the blues. We're going to add all the blues. So this is Winter Frost. This is Snow Flurries. That one's getting a good amount out. That. And then I think I've got one more, and that's Shiny Bauble. All right, so the next step is come in with your palette knife and mix your colors up a bit. Now, I'm gonna grab my stencil, which is by PM Artist Studios, and you can see I've already used it once, and it's not going to go all the way across, so we're just going to do a second one. Then you pull up your shaving cream and smoosh it down through your stencil to your paper, and it's going to transfer your color. And you don't want to mix too much because you want the marbling effect, but it's cool no matter what ends up happening. All right, now we are going to lift up our stencil. And we're gonna leave this sit for a little while before we wipe it off. Not too long, just a little bit to let the ink kind of settle in. Now you can just leave it like this. I prefer to wipe off the excess shaving cream. And so we're just gonna go like that. So yeah, it also helps prevent streaking if you leave it sit a little longer. But I'm not mad at that. I'm okay with a little bit of smudgy blurs, because I have a feeling this is gonna have more white on this background than what I necessarily want. And I can see a little bit of the shimmer. There's a little shimmer in there. All right, let's shift over. I need to be careful. I don't want to go over where I've already been. So we're just gonna stick that piece of paper there and stencil the rest of this page. Gonna set this aside and leave it alone for a little bit, and I'm also gonna go ahead and use up the rest of the blue on some other pieces of paper. I'll pull out some more stencils and do some more backgrounds, and then we'll be back. Okay, so I let this dry and cleaned up, and we're gonna just wipe this off and set this guy aside for now. I may decide to do some more stuff to it. Haven't decided yet. Have to think about that. Oh, and I did do some more on that junky piece. And I need to wipe it off actually. So I just grabbed a bunch of stencils and did some random pieces that I can then use for future projects. And I did want to come back on and have a bit of a play with another color combo. And this is just some regular cardstock, because I want to see about doing fresh balsam, Juniper Berry, with a little ice spruce, maybe a little Hickory Smoke Oxide, and some Lost Shadow. Let's just do maybe a drop of ice spruce. A drop of the Hickory Smoke. And there's still some blue on there from the previous batch, but I figured that's all right, it'll be fine. Now let's grab our micas and add some of those. This time I'm going to try and get more of the mica on here. Wondering if I would have been better if I grabbed a pipette and just piped out some. I think this is going to be interesting. Now let's grab a stencil. This is Aall Creates Snow Crystals. And I wanted to grab, this is a Lawn Fawn layering stencil. Can I get that guy on over here? Yes. And I probably will just do the one layer, but we'll see. All right. This one should be interesting to do since it's so open, but it means we're going to get a lot more color on our page. Thinking I should have skipped the grays. Just gonna smush the rest on here. I did that on some scrap pieces of paper with the blue, and it was kind of cool. It just created some interesting paper. that can be used on future projects. It's always good to play around when you've got the stuff out and you're playing. Let's get this corner down here. This way, if I want to cut that out as like a square, it's covered. All right, let's reveal. All right. Let's pull this guy up. Interesting. I think I may want to try around without the grays in it and just do the 2 micas. I'm gonna clean up. I'm gonna do some off camera just using the stains and see how those come out, and I'll be back with the results and then we'll do another background. So here are the ones I did using the Frosted Juniper and Juniper Berry. And I actually added for this one some Phantom Mist and Frozen Fog. No, it's Juniper Berry and... You know what? I meant to do Fresh Balsam and Frosted Juniper. And I think I did Fresh Balsam and Juniper Berry. And then added Frozen Fog and Phantom Mist. And so these are the results I got. This one... You can't really see the stenciling all that well because it came out very light. And then these were with just the Fresh Balsam and Juniper Berry. I'll have to go back and try the Frosted Juniper and Frozen Balsam combo because that was the combo I had wanted to try. But so those are the rest of the results I got. And now we're moving on to the next backgrounds I want to create. And I'm doing another piece that's 11 by 14, and I want to create wallpaper for the background because it's going to be a scene with Santa delivering presents. So I've pulled out Tim Holtz Sizzix 3D texture fades. This is one of the large A5 ones that came out this year, and it's 666888, and this is Botanical Large. I also pulled out 666884, which is Lumber Large, and that one I already went ahead and did. And basically what I did was took archival ink and inked the embossing folder before running the paper through, and this is just craft cardstock to get that look. I'm also going to do a few more pieces with the lumber, but I want to try and get something a little bit more birch feeling, so we'll do that in a bit. What I want to work on now is the wallpaper, and so I took my big piece and cut it down to a size that'll fit in the embossing folder. So these guys will fit in the embossing folder perfectly, and then had this piece left, and I inked it with aged mahogany. So I'm going to show you that on the smaller piece because I figured just watching me swirl ink on a big piece of paper, really not all that interesting, but just so you can see how I did it. Now I started off the piece and came in because I wanted it darker at the edges and light towards the middle. I didn't want to get too dark in the middle. And what I'll probably do after embossing the big guys is cut them all to about this size so they look like, you know, panels of wallpaper. Alright, so the next step is to take your embossing folder. Now when you look at the embossing folder, there's a part where the image is depressed and a part where it's raised up. And so what we want to do is ink the raised up part. And actually I was testing out ink colors, which is not the color we're going to use for this. We're going to use the Hickory Smoke archival ink. So usually when I emboss something, I use the raised side, but for this technique, we're going to end up using the deboss side, which is the side where the pattern is pressed into the paper, because that's how we're going to get the inkiness of the image on there. So, and I've done this before on my channel, but I figure there's always the chance someone new is watching or someone who hasn't seen that video, and so it's best to just go over the technique. So we're gonna rub our ink over our embossing folder. On the raised side, we're going to put our piece of paper in so that the side we want the ink on is facing down and pressed onto the paper. And now I'm going to go take this to my embossing machine and run it through. And I'm going to do it 2 more times to get all of the papers done, and then I'll be back. I did want to point out, if after you run it through you find that you want a little bit more ink on, keep the piece of paper in place and you can add more ink, because there are a few spots I would like a little bit more ink on this. Place it back down and run it through. You just want to be careful you don't shift it or it's going to make your image blurry. Okay, so these pieces are all done. I'm going to set them aside until I work on that project. Now, if you're worried about the ink on your folder, because I use archival ink, it should be permanent once it's dry and shouldn't cause any problems. But if you don't want to have staining, what you can do is either grab, there's archival ink cleaner, or you can just use some hand sanitizer and clean it off. But as I said, because I used a permanent ink. Now, if you use something like a pigment ink or a distress ink that is less permanent, potentially on here, you're going to want to clean it off, or you might get it on your next project. Like a pigment ink's not necessarily going to dry on the plastic of the embossing folder, and distress ink, it always reactivates when it gets wet. So if you use those for this technique, you're definitely going to want to give it a good clean. But with the archival, you may get some staining, but it shouldn't be an issue with later usage, even if you don't clean it. Okay, now, I said I wanted to do some wood, so I did lumber again, and I ran through about 6 pieces, and this is Canson XL watercolor paper. Because it is a thick paper, I sprayed it with some water first before I ran it through my embossing folder, and I kind of ran it through 4 times. Like, I went through and then came back and ran it through again and then came back, just to make sure I got a good impression. And this technique is inspired by Stacey Hutchinson, who is one of Tim Holtz's makers, and it's a Tattered Nest, I think is her blog. I'll leave a link to the post down below. And I've actually already done the next step on 5 of the pages, so I'm just going to show you on page 6. I'm going to grab a little bit of white paint. I've got my brayer over here off to the side. I'm going to put a little paint out. And like, this has been sitting in my stash for who knows how long. It was an extra one that I picked up and I pulled out when I realized I didn't have white paint in the last video. And so the first several that I did, the paint was like super thick and clumpy. And then some of the it separated a little, so now it's like super loose. And so I'm just lightly brayering. I'm not pressing down very hard, because what this is going to do is going to create a resist for our inking, so that there'll be white spots left. So I'm going to set aside that. I'm going to set this one aside and let it dry. And I'm going to put up my splat box. And we're going to use some spray stains. And I've grabbed an Oxide to try and get a nice, like, gray-blue weathered wood look for these pieces. So I have grabbed Lost Shadow, Ice Spruce, Pumice Stone, Distressed Spray Stain, and I've also got Hickory Smoke. Also thinking about tossing in a little Pumice Stone Oxide and Antique Linen Oxide. Now those need to get shaken up. And maybe a little bit of Salvage Patina Oxide and possibly a little Shabby Shutters, just to get some interest in our piece. So I am gonna just start spraying. And actually, oh, and I didn't mention, I did dry it before I put the paint on, and I made sure the paint's dry. And we're gonna add a little bit more water, because that'll help get our inks moving. So let's do a little lost shadow. And actually, I probably should just put a couple in here to go at once. Might as well work on multiples. Let's get some lost shadow, a little hickory smoke, some pumice stone, some iced spruce, and let's do a little pumice stone oxide. And let's get this moving around a little bit. Woo! I feel like I want some more dark in these, that they're too light. Also think I need my other spritzer so I can add more water to get this stuff moving around. All right, let's dip it around. Let's see where we're at. Definitely need a little bit darker, so let's grab some hickory smoke. That'll get us, that's lighter than, maybe a little more iced spruce. Let's see what happens when we dry these guys. Kind of like that. I kind of want to see what adding a little shabby shutters. And a little, oh, that is very bright. That is way brighter than what I want. We're definitely gonna need to come in and darken that up. Let's do our iced spruce. And water spritzer. I like how they're coming out, and look at how different. All right, I am liking how these are coming out. I'm gonna do basically the same process for all 6 pieces. I'm gonna set these aside, let them finish drying completely. And then I think I'm gonna try running one of them back through the embossing folder because I got a little heavy-handed with the water, and as a result, like the details, it's not as well embossed as it was at the start. And I think I may do that and then try and get more of the ink like runneling down in the embossed areas to bring that out. So yeah, I'm gonna go finish inking the other 4 pieces and then I'll be back. Okay, so while those are finishing drying, I wanted to ink up some blue pieces for yet another project I've got going on. And this is one of those ideas, I'm like, I picked these rugs up on a suggestion of Tiffany Solaro. I'll leave a link to her channel down below, for using with your sprays, and I never remember to use them. And I keep thinking, you know, they'd probably be good for if I put them down and then put my cleanup paper down below. I'd have to spend less time cleaning up. And so I'm just grabbing out blues. So that was Salvage Patina. This is Salvage Patina Oxide. And this is mostly because I'm like, it'd be nice to get some inky blue backgrounds that I can do fairly quickly, which is one of the upsides of using sprays. Whew. That one's Mermaid Lagoon. No, that was Salty Ocean, and I do have Mermaid Lagoon. Let's do a little bit of that. And then we are gonna add some water and get this moving around because this is a lot darker than I had in mind. So what we're probably gonna do is get the color moving because I need 4 panels. So we're just gonna smoosh 2 panels together, which will lighten up our panels. Let's spray this guy. Also have some other scrap pieces from cutting this down, so I can use that to help kind of spread out the ink so that we don't have too dark of a background. Start drying. All right, let's I'm just gonna use my finger to make sure I've got ink everywhere that I want it. That should be good. Want to do one more thing with these guys. I've got the splat box out, and that is add some splatters of frozen fog. Actually, before I do that, I want to do another step on these. I'm realizing that'll work better if I do that first. All right. Well, this is going to make for very easy cleanup. Okay, so the other thing I want to do for these pieces is I want to stamp like trees for the background. So, all right, so I've grabbed Line CMS 244, and we're going to use these guys to stamp a tree line for our background on these. All right, now that one I'm gonna stamp them about here because for this piece, eventually, I'm gonna add in the foreground our little car on the road. So let me grab my mouse pad so I have squishiness underneath. Grab a block. I'm gonna use Ice Spruce Distress ink. And I'm gonna do a test stamp on a piece of paper just because I want to know how intense this is gonna be. Because again, this is creating a background, so kind of want them in the background. As tends to happen when you stamp with distress ink, it's kind of blotchy. I think what we're gonna do is another test. We'll do that. We're gonna give it a misty spritz. So I've spritzed it with a little water. And we're gonna try stamping on here again and see how that comes out. I'm not mad at that. So let's re-ink this. Going to mist it off the side so I don't get water all over this. Although there will be some reactivating because we are stamping on distress ink with a wet stamp. Ooh, that got a little wetter than I wanted, but I'm not actually mad at that. Actually, kind of what I was hoping for, you know, like a misty background of trees. And what I can do is come in with a few of the individual trees and stamp a couple of those. Trying to decide what I want to do on this one, because this one I haven't decided what I'm putting on there, and I may not even be using this one. I'm gonna hold off on doing anything else with that one because I may have done more than I needed. And then these guys, let's go that way and that way at the top. As the top, we're gonna do, I think, 2 rows of trees, because for this one I'm going to be putting like figures and Tim Holtzy and the Tim Holtz woodland trees and stuff in front. So I don't need a road line like I kind of did on that one. So we're going to do this guy. And then this one down in front, and then a few individual trees in front of that. And I'm not too worried about the fact that I've got like that harsh line, because once we fill in everything and I add a few more, stamped trees, like I stick one there. Now I keep drying in between because wet on wet blends and wet and dry on dry layers. So if they overlap at all, I don't want them blending. I want them layering on top of each other. I think the line's broken up enough because, again, there's going to be a bunch of stuff in front. I just wanted to give it like a wintry scene for the background. Let me do this one real quick. I'm gonna just rapidly do the same process, though this time I think I'm gonna use the smaller one at the very far back because I think that's gonna end up making the line at the bottom less noticeable when I stamp the bigger ones. Plus, technically, further away is supposed to be smaller, closer up is supposed to be bigger, so from a perspective standpoint, it makes more sense to do the smaller one towards the back. All right, now I am going to cause a craft avalanche. We're gonna put our cleanup paper back down. We're gonna put our little mats back down. We are gonna grab the Frozen Fog Distress mica spray that I had recently. Here it is. And we're gonna add snow to our scene. That's a little bigger than I want, so I'm just gonna come in and dab most of it off. I'm gonna flip these upside down and do a little more splats. Actually, what I'm gonna do is put some on a block, add just a touch of water, and use a brush. I think I'm getting some on. Okay, let's add a bit more of that. So now we've got shimmery snow. I'm gonna set those aside and do the last one. Hit this with the heat tool so we can see what it looks like dry. Definitely some shimmer going on. The bigger splats aren't quite dry yet, but we're gonna set this aside and I'm going to figure out what I'm doing next. I'll be right back. All right, so I want to do one more thing to these backgrounds before we're done for the day, and I've been doing a little bit of experimenting on them. These guys aren't quite dry yet. I did try running, I think, this one through again, and I don't think I got it lined up quite right because it's a little fuzzier than the other ones. But I do want to bring out the lines a little bit. So what I did was I grabbed ground espresso, and I held the piece upright and dribbled some ground espresso across the top. Now I noticed it was really intense and I ended up getting puddles on my mat. So what I ended up doing as I went along was, instead of using straight out of the bottle, I grabbed a pipette I had and sucked up the stuff that was on the mat, which of course had some water added in, and did that and just ran it along the top. And this one, because it is mostly fresh from the bottle, it's a little intense. So just spritz at the top and held the piece upright, so I don't know how well you can see what's going on, so that the ink would dribble down and kind of run into the grooves. Kind of went in a few spots, strategic spots that I was like, ooh, let's bring out some of this kind of thing. And then just kept going back and spritzing to make sure it moved and didn't leave too harsh of a line. Like, that's getting a little harsh on that edge there. And I tapped off any excess. I don't know, you probably can't see. Okay, probably can't see what I'm doing. Let me try doing it a little bit better on screen. So the waterier it is, the better it kind of just like runs down the channels on the paper. I'm trying to get this like big line to get ink down it. And it looks like it's taking over, but because we used oxides, they kind of rise to the top when you're doing inky backgrounds over your distress inks. And because this is distress ink, or a distress spray stain, which is distress ink in ground espresso, the oxides will kind of rise above. Alright, that's mostly dry. I'm gonna let this finish drying. I'm gonna have a clean up, then we'll come back and take a look at what we got done today. Alright, so let's take a look at everything we got done today. We have got our stenciled background using the shaving cream method and using Distress Reinkers and Distress Mica sprays. And we did do a few extra pieces using that technique so that we've got plenty to play with. And we started with our grungy stamped pieces, both with ink blending for the background and without. And then we did our inking and using embossing folder. And then we did our grungy wood grain backgrounds. They are fully dry and really cool. Really like how these guys came out. And can you believe? Same exact folder. Two totally different looks. And then finally we did our blue inky backgrounds with our Misty Tree stamping. And I know I did another one on camera, but it's stuck in the box because I was testing it out. So that's all for today. If you enjoyed this video, please do all the things that lets YouTube know you enjoyed the video. Like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, leave me a comment down below. Thanks for joining me, and happy crafting.